Hello, from Five Valley Seed Library. We are acknowledging that these are Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kalispel people. We honor the path that they have always shown us in caring for this place for the generations to come. And we celebrate indigenous culture by encouraging gardeners to plant native seeds and use organic methods of growing. And for MCAT, this presentation is being recorded by Missoula Community Access Television as part of a media assistance grant donated to Five Valley Seed Library by MCAT. All right. Thank you for being here.
I'm going to try speaking without the microphone. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Can you guys hear me? Okay. If you can't, stop me. And I'll use the problem with the mic is it does this whole area. And you guys want to hear me, but they don't. So. Okay. My name is Paul Buck, and I've been around Missoula since, well, came to school here in 1971. Left, came back. Then I've been gardening about 18 years now. Part of it in Gunnison, Colorado, which is at 8,000 feet, and most of the time here in Missoula. What I want to do today is just go through some of the very basics of seed saving so that, well, basically with seed saving, you have to start now. You got to think about what you're going to be doing, what seeds you want to save, and what you're going to be doing during the summer. And so I'll be going through the basics. I won't be specific about a lot of the plants, which I'll leave. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But plants vary greatly. I mean, you look at native plants, and what they do is it's just an incredible variety of ways they produce seeds, spread seeds, and so on. It's kind of the same way with gardening. So let's dive into it. Okay, the outline, why we save seeds, quite a variety of reasons. Look a little bit about the plant morphology and the flowers and how they produce seeds and so on, because that is very important as far as what you save at the end of the season. And then the actual process of saving the seeds. Okay, why saving seeds? Number one, it's economical. I don't know if you all have noticed, but the prices of seeds has just been going up, just like everything else. And I used to be able to buy a packet of seeds for, a couple bucks. Now it's $4 or $5. And so economics plays a good part of that. Preserve genetic diversity. A lot of the companies that produce seeds will pick the seeds for what the properties that they want. A lot of times that's for look, that's for transportation of the product, and so they're looking for different values within the produce than you might be. Select for plants that grow best in your garden. As you probably know, that every spot you look at is a microclimate. And it never really made sense until I started getting involved with native plants. And if you think about it, you'll have a sunflower out someplace, and it'll produce hundreds of seeds. But yet, there aren't that many plants around. And what it is that seed must land in a little microclimate, and it's very small, the right soil contact, the right moisture, the right shade, and so on, for it to germinate. And so what we're doing is looking to create the seed and then find the microclimate for our garden. Connect with your garden and plant community. What we're doing, trading seeds, you get to talk to people, you get ideas, you get enthusiasm. Like right now, my itch to get out in the garden kind of fell off a little bit. For a while there, I was like, okay, I'm ready. But qualities and be looking for the things that you want. You know, for example, tomatoes. You might want a Roma with a more meaty tomato. And so you can, as you grow your plants during the summer, you can pick that plant or that tomato plant and test that tomato to see if that's what you want. And so one of the great benefits of saving your own seeds is you can get what you want. Okay, start with the parts of the flower. Most of you will probably know this already. The main parts, as far as reproduction goes, is for the female part, it's the pistil, the style, and the ovary, where the seeds are actually produced. For the male part, it's the stamen and the anther. That's where the pollen comes from. And so with plants, and there's a lot of varieties and ways, is to get the pollen from the stamen of that plant or a different plant to the pistil. And then the process of fertilization and germination will start. Oops. Okay, the formation of seeds, again, occurs in the ovary of the flower. And you can compare an apple, which is pretty simple compared to a lot of seeds and fruit, to the seed itself. And you can see that the apple, well, I got ahead of myself, just a second. Okay, there we go. The apple, structure of the apple compares directly with the structure of the flower, and which is really interesting that the little sepals you find on the end of apples, well, they're the sepal from the flower that the apple grew from. And so the idea again is to get the pollen to go down through the pistil, down to the ovary with the eggs for fertilization of the eggs. And once that starts, then it triggers the plant into fruit production. Okay, what do you get? This is one very large fruit with many seeds. And what I'm just showing here is that different plants, you end up with, as you know, a wide variety of fruits and seeds. Coconut is one seed. And so the whole process is extremely interesting. And this is another benefit of saving your own seeds, because then you can look into how this happens, what you need to do, and you learn a lot more, and you become more intimate, shall I say, with your plants, much more familiar with them. And it makes, for me, it's been a real plus for gardening to get into seed saving. Okay, what type of flower does the plant have? A complete flower, like that apple flower, has both the male and female parts to it. So basically the pollen from the male stamen can go over to the female pistil, fertilize the eggs, and you can start the production. We'll get more into that a little bit here. That's a complete flower. And so when you decide what you want to save the seeds from, whether it be broccoli, carrots, peas, whatever, you have to take into consideration what kind of flower does that plant have. Incomplete flower, the male and female flowers are on different flowers. For instance, spinach or cucurbits, all your squash. With the spinach, the well, with the squash, both the male and the female flowers are on the same plant, and you can tell the difference between them. With the spinach, different plants have different flowers, and so you'll have the fruit production on one and just the pollen coming off the other. And so taking these into consideration, you have to think, okay, I'm going to raise spinach. I want the seeds from the spinach. Well, then you have to go and make sure, as you let them go to seed, do I have both male and female? And then if I want to save from squash, I need to transfer that pollen from the male flower to the female flower. Is this all making sense? Any questions so far? Okay. These are things you just have to consider as the season goes on and right now what you plant. Okay. How is the flower pollinated? Most effective pollination is done by animals, insects, hummingbirds, wasps. The most effective are actually the native bees. A native bee can go, I think I want to say 100 times more effective than a honeybee, because the native bee is larger, it's hairier, it is looking for both nectar and pollen, but it also can, gather pollen at much greater temperature, lower temperatures. I mean, they can go down to a lot of them can go down to 50 degrees, the native bumblebees. And so they're actually more effective than honeybees. But anyway, most is done by animals, wind, lettuce, spinach, grasses. But when I raise spinach, when I go to pollinate the spinach, I will take the male flower or the male stalk and then take it and just bang it right against the female stalk with the flowers on it. And that helps as far as fertilization of the flowers. Hand, again, like I was just talking about, you can do either with the brush. A lot of people for tomatoes will use a brush or some kind of cotton swab or something, or a tuning fork. A tuning fork, you may have heard about it, is with tomatoes, they need a vibration to release the pollen from the sepals so that it gets down to the pistil. And so they'll take a tuning fork and touch each flower, and that just gives it a vibration. But bumblebees and a lot of the places, I won't say, a lot of the greenhouses that are growing tomatoes, they will actually have a bumblebee hive in there, and they'll let the bumblebees do. And if you get the chance, go and watch it. It's really amazing. The bumblebee will land on the flower, and then it's got muscles in its wings. It doesn't flap the wings, but it vibrates those muscles, and it'll actually go, and it's called buzz pollination, and it releases that pollen for that flower. And that's basically what the tuning fork or brush does. Okay, cross-pollination is when pollen is taken from one plant to another. Self-pollination is when the flower of the same plant is pollinated. Okay, you can have, well, like all of your lettuce, it's Asteraceae is the family. All that family, the pollen can can pollinate the same flower, and so pollinates the same flower. But you take, and it's on the same plant, and so the squash, you have a male and female flower, and so you can take the pollen from the male flower back to the female flower, and that's also considered self-pollination. Now, what's important in here is that when you get to selecting what you want to save the seeds from, you want to make sure that you try and eliminate as much cross-pollination as you can. Because you know that, well, I say you know, that when you plant a squash, if you have two varieties here and here and you cross-pollinate them, you might get something that's very pretty but totally unedible. And that's how they create different lines of squash and different varieties. So one of the things we'll look at is trying to prevent cross-pollination. That is taking it from one plant to another. Okay, life cycle is another important one. Annuals, you know, annuals, I probably don't have to explain this, but it's when they're planted, germinate, produce fruit and flowers and fruit in the same year, and then they die. Okay. Squash, there's a lot of them. Tomatoes, most of them are annuals. A perennial lives for more than 2 years. It has deep roots. You know, we all know what perennials are: strawberries, raspberries. A biennial is one that we have to take into consideration. Carrots, onions, what they do is the first year, plant the seed, you'll get vegetative growth, a nice root, but they will not go to flower for the most part the first year. You have to leave them in the ground or take them out or put them back in. And that's what, for onions, like you'll see sets of onions, you plant sets instead of seeds. The set has already been grown from 1 year and you replant it. So again, as you decide what you want to save in your garden, you have to take these 3 things into consideration. Any questions about that? Is that all making sense? You all already know all this?
I'm curious if you do carrots. I would like to do carrots, but I don't really want to take some time to take them out of the ground and cuddle them through the winter. So I'm wondering in Montana, do we leave them in?
You can leave them in the ground, but I would put about that much straw over them. Just pack them with straw. And as the season starts warming up, pull a good portion of that straw back so you just have a little bit like that. And then once the growth comes out, the leaves start coming, take the rest away. Yeah. Yeah. In Colorado, we used to take hay bales. I lived on a ranch. And we took hay bales and stuck on the carrots. And I saved some for the next year. But then we would take the carrots out. Even in January, we'd go out and move the hay bales and dig down. The ground hadn't frozen yet, but it was real cold. And so there's a lot you can do. Yeah?
Squashes will Peppo and Maxima cross?
Well, the species is all Peppo, but then there's different varieties. And what happens is if you have a winter, let's say, Hubbard squash and a spaghetti squash, well, the bee comes along, goes to the female flower on the Hubbard, and then goes over to the squash, goes to the male flower on the Hubbard, and then goes over to the female flower on the spaghetti, and you're going to get a mix, and you don't know what's going to come out. So is that?
The Hubbard is a Maxima and a spaghetti is a Peppo.
But they will cross-pollinate. And so that's where you got to take that into consideration. And where you plant them and what you do as far as taking care of the flower, which I'll show you in a second. Okay, starting with, right now, I start with a known seed, something that I've tried before, a company I should say, a company I've tried before, and I know that they'll produce good seed. So I usually start with Johnny's, Triple Divide is a good one, and then Seeds Trust. You know, Triple Divide, Montana. Johnny's comes out of Maine mostly, and then Seeds Trust is a Colorado group that out of Boulder, and so they're higher altitude too, and their seeds are more acclimated. Their plants are more acclimated to the kind of climate we have here. You can buy a variety of things. I buy these sometimes and plant them, but I don't use them starting out to save the seeds on. I only do what I trust. Start with good seed, you're going to end up with a better product. Okay, which plants do I save seeds from? Reasons to select plants: rapid germination. That's a hard one. If you're going to, I've started to try to plant seeds, and even tomatoes, the fall before, and I've had some pretty good success with it. And so rapid germination, if it grows up too fast in the beginning, the chances of freezing it out is a concern. So you kind of have to look at that as far as what you want, as far as maturation during the spring and summer, and what the weather's like. Flavor, like tomatoes, I can go grab a tomato when it's ripened on the vine, taste it, look at it, say, hey, that's something I like. And then I can save the seed from that tomato. Color, that's more of an aesthetic thing. Vegetative growth, delayed bolting. Bolting is a problem here, and it's going to be bigger. Bolting is due to a couple of things: heat and lack of water. And as our climate gets hotter, we're going to have greater problems with bolting. So if you find a plant that isn't bolting as soon, then it's when the plant, the life cycle of a plant is to grow, germinate, start growing, produce a flower, and then produce seeds, so it goes on. Now the heat and drought tells the plant it's not a good climate right now. And so that plant will just put everything it's got into shooting up, producing flowers and seeds. And the produce you get out of that plant is going to be minimal because the plant is wanting to produce seeds. Is that making sense? Okay. Good flower, fruit production, and disease resistance. In the past summers, what kind of problems have you had with diseases? Has anybody had any outstanding problems? On which?
Well, actually, mostly on my peat bog and narda. Sometimes my chard and my kale. Sometimes.
Okay. Did you hear that? There's mildew, different kinds of mildew. There's a black, white. Yeah, powdery mildew. Do you water overhead or?
I started doing a drip line and it helps a lot.
Yeah. Yeah, if you're not aware that, it's what's true of a lot of plants. If you water overhead, there's a greater chance of the powdery mildew taking place. And it's a fungus that grows on the leaf, and it can only do it when the leaf is damp and so on. So watering, either drip irrigation or taking the hose and keeping it right down on the ground is best. And that's true of a lot of plants, especially to the cucurbits, squash. Powdery mildew can wipe you out fast. Okay, any questions or comments on this? Okay, and so that's why when I'm saving seeds from a plant, or I want to save seeds from a plant, I watch those plants more carefully and start looking at these criteria as the season progresses. And I save peas, snap peas, sugar peas, a lot, and as the season goes on, I watch the plants that grow better and produce the most flowers, and the pea pods, what size they are, and so on. And I've been saving peas for 18 years now, and it's really been beneficial. Whoops. Okay, now getting back to what I just said, identify the plants that you want to save. Mark them. Mark them so that you know if you have a whole row of plants and you see one that you like, mark it some way so that you don't. My problem with peas was, okay, I'd find a good pea and I wouldn't mark it or something, then I'd go along and pick it and eat it, you know. It's like, save for more than one flower or more than one fruit on a plant. If you have a tomato plant or a pea plant or whatever, don't take just one group of, from one plant and one flower. Take from a variety of the same plant, of course, because you never know how many are going to germinate. There's always a certain percentage aren't going to germinate. Save from more than one plant and save from enough seeds for 3 years of crop. And my lesson was several years ago. Well, see, I lived in Colorado on a ranch. There were cattle right up to the, and I had cow manure, horse manure, sheep manure, llama manure, chicken manure. So I had this great garden. But I didn't have any problems with pests because it was so cold and shorter growing season, but it was cold. Well, here, I took my peas, put them up. I had fences that, you know, they grew up 6 feet and all. And I left for a couple days. The deer came in. And the peas had grown up, so there were flowering pods and so on. And they mowed it off. I'd planted 200 pea plants, and they mowed the whole thing. I didn't get any seeds that year. Now, if I had saved some seeds from year to year, and that's the point here, is you never know. If you like that variety of plant, you never know what the next year is going to do. So it's always good to save some extra for 3 years. Is that making sense? And okay, now processing and storage. 2 things, decomposition and germination. We do not want them to decompose or to germinate. And doing that, we look at dormancy, moisture, temperature. I keep my seeds, for the most part, I keep them out in an unheated garage. And I found that to work very well. If I keep them inside, I really don't have a place inside that's not heated. And so out in the garage, it'll drop into the 30s, but that's okay. And it's best to, I'll go through that in a minute, but moisture, you want to keep the moisture content of the seeds as low as possible, but not totally dry. I'll get to that. Temperature, 30s, 40s. Has always worked. The refrigerator is not good because it cycles. The amount of moisture in your refrigerator will cycle quite a bit, and you'll get condensation and so on. Oxygen, like most of the packets out there, are in paper. They're not sealed in plastic. Well, when a seed is just sitting, dormancy, it's got to have a little bit of oxygen. It cannot be sealed off. There's a little bit of metabolism that's going on as far as respiration within the plant is going on. Light, no light, scarification. Scarification is basically what you're doing is the seed coat, you're disrupting that seed coat in a variety of ways. A lot of native plants need it, and you could do it through heat, water, or mechanical. But there aren't many, I can't think of any vegetable seeds that really need to have the seed coat rubbed or broken up a little bit. Yeah, I can't think of anything. The only flower I can think of that I use a lot is nasturtium. You'll take them and rub them on a piece of sandpaper or something. What it does is the seed coat on the nasturtium is extremely hard and impermeable. And so if you just break that coat, it allows water and oxygen to get in there to start the germination process. So, okay, any questions on this?
It sounds like you prefer to do paper envelopes.
Well, I didn't quite get to what I do. I use old medicine because it's, these are not sealed. There's oxygen can still get through. I can put a little piece of paper in there, write what year, and then I can just throw them in a box, set them out in the garage. Animals can't get in it. If you have mice or whatever, can't chew on it. So I use these quite a bit. But paper's fine too. But again, with paper, you got to make sure that it's not open and available for animals and so on. And then I use sometimes, like I have all my spinach in here. And then again, this is not sealed, but it's a big enough container. So, and okay. The process, you want to let the fruit dry as much as possible, and I dry it in a shaded spot and let it dry without any extra heat, just air temperature, because that way the plant and the seeds dry out in a normal way. As far as the peas go, I leave them on the vine until the shells start getting hard, and then I pull them. Same thing with everything. Tomatoes. If I end up at the season with a lot of tomatoes that aren't ripe, I'll cut the tomato off at the bottom, take them inside, and hang them upside down. And that allows the tomatoes to mature and allows the sap and the juices of the plant to get down into the tomatoes. So basically, you just want to let it dry naturally, no excess heat. What kind of fruit is it? Fleshy, apple squash, pods, beans. That's just something to think about as you're approaching saving those seeds and how you're going to dry them. Tomatoes, what I do is just clean the tomatoes. Well, take the seeds out, eat the rest of the tomato, and then wash them real good, trying to get some of the gelatinous part of the seed coat on there. Wash them real good, and then lay them out and dry them, room temperature, and then store them. Again, you want to make sure they're dry enough. We'll get into that. Okay. To check if they're dry enough, you can take a seed and, like, this is coriander, and it's kind of a ball. I don't know if you're familiar with coriander. It's like a ball. What I do is just take it, squash it like that, and if it squashes and breaks apart, then I know it's dry enough. You don't want to over dry and keep, well, as I said before, over dry the seeds and keep them in too high of a temperature, because that way you're basically mummifying the seeds and they're not going to grow. Other things you can do is take a look at the seeds. Look at the color, shape, and do a germination test if you need to. And that's where you take the seeds, take some paper towel, wet it, put the paper towel over it, put it in a 70-degree at least area, and see what germinates and what doesn't. Shape, color. These are actually native plants. It's Cleome or Rocky Mountain bee plant. I have some over there if you want some. But take a look at the seeds. You can see here, and you see it in watermelon too. You'll see dark seeds and white seeds. The white seeds are usually ones, the seeds develop, but they're not fertilized. And so take a look at whatever seed you're making or saving, and look at the shape. With squash seeds, you'll see sometimes they're flat and they're not rounded. So the flat ones, they're not fertilized. And so it's important to inspect the seeds that you want to save. Okay, packaging. I went over this a little bit already. I saved mine in pill bottles, but you can do it. Make sure just that it's sealed, not airproof, and protected from pests, insects, mice, mold. I try and clean my seeds off as much as possible. Like lettuce seeds is extremely difficult to separate the seeds, so separate as good as I can. There's going to be some chaff in there. Just make sure it's dry and that mold can't start forming. The more chaff you have in there, the greater the chance that mold's going to form. And then label your container what you have. So, dry, low humidity, 40, 60 degrees. I say 40 to 60 here, but actually I found 30 to 40 is better. So a lot of places say 40 to 60. Frozen, it's really hard to keep frozen seeds. Some people try it. Mostly it's the cycling of your freezer. You know, it thaws out and goes back and forth. They've got to be sealed completely. And it's just extremely difficult. I've never had any luck with it. Moisture low and dark. Okay, so look at a couple real quicks saving it. The cucurbits, spaghetti squash, pepo. It's monoecious, which means it has male and female flowers on it, and it's an annual. Okay, these are the flowers. Which one do you think is male and which ones do you think is female? Female here? Yep. This is the ovary, basically. And so these are from the same plant. And so what I do is, from the stamens over there, I take a Q-tip, get a bunch of pollen on it, and then come up here when this opens up and tap the pistil in the middle. And just cover it. Because if you think about it, for every pollen grain that goes on here from the male flower produces one seed. So you've seen how many seeds are in a squash plant sometimes. So that's how many pollen grains have to go on here. So you've got to make sure it's well covered. Okay.
Blossoms after you've pollinated it, then do you use a rubber band? Do you do like painter's tape? How do you close the flower, or do you, once you've done the manual pollination yourself?
I use string. I just take some string. But one step you got to do before. Cross-pollination. It's a real problem with the squash. You'll see Johnnies. They'll grow one kind of squash over here, and a quarter mile away they'll grow over here, but I don't have that room, none of us do. So what I do, and this is not squash, of course, this is amaryllis, which I have 20 blossoms on 4 amaryllis plants right now, and it's like incredible. Anyway, what I do is before that blossom, let me go back to the other one. As this blossom is forming here, and right before it opens, I'll take a net and cover it on the female and the male. And so when they open up like this, I'll take them off, and then that's when I will actually do the pollination myself. Because if I leave these open, they're fair game to every bee or wasp or whatever that comes along. And then I'll cover them again with the female one with the net until this flower matures and drops off. And then I can take the netting off and then I tie a string around it. Do that with pea pods, tomatoes, everything. I just get some twine or string and tie around that flower, and so I know which one I'm saving. Does that make sense? That's where cross-pollination comes in. You really have to watch it. Okay, broccoli. It's an annual, but it can be grown as a tender perennial, which I've tried, had minimal luck with it. But that's another one in which you have to prevent cross-pollination with. That's how they get those broccoli, cauliflower crosses and so on, is by cross-pollinating them. And so I want to keep true to the plant. Then you have to take the stalk here cover it up, make sure it gets pollinated. You can do it yourself. And then take it off once the flowers start falling off. You know, I would take this whole stalk here, cover it, and pollinate it myself. Because these are native bees in there, and they just, I mean, they're so fast. You can't follow them. Spinach, it's dioecious, so that means that it's got male flowers on one plant, female flowers on another. And basically, there's nothing else in my garden or around the area that will cross-pollinate with spinach. So I don't worry about it. But I will, as the flowers form. And this is, I don't know if you've ever seen spinach, but the male flowers are usually at the top of the plant, sort of a spike. The female flowers are usually down here, lower. And so what I'll do is, as soon as the pollen is forming, female flowers are ready, I'll cut this off and then just to make sure. You can take a stalk of spinach with male flowers on it and bang it like that, and just a cloud of pollen comes off. That's really cool. But spinach is really easy to save. And then just let it mature, go dry completely, and then, does anybody save spinach? They come up in little balls, like things like this. And that's a whole bunch of seeds right there. And you have to break those are about 5 or 6 seeds in there. And so spinach is something that's really easy. If you got a good variety, I have a winter variety that I can plant in the fall, and it comes up, starts coming up, and so I saved all the seeds from it. And in fact, this year in my greenhouse, an unheated greenhouse, I had spinach and lettuce going for 10 out of 12 months this year. That's unheard of here. Okay, resources. Make sure your resources are good. I've brought up a lot of things here, and if you decide what you want to save, and then do some investigation, look at the sources, but you got to make sure you have reputable sources. I was scanning the internet the other day, and on plants, and this woman said, I got the best, I'm going to get the best tomatoes. And so she takes a cup of salt, and she's walking down her row of tomatoes and pouring this salt on there, and I'm going, this doesn't make sense. And then she takes some sugar and pours on it. And this is some crazy YouTube thing. And so make sure your sources are good. I like the extension offices, and then there's a lot of other good, reputable places. I just saw this cartoon the other day, and true for everything in life, you know, whether it's vaccine or plants, you know. Crazy. Okay, thank you. That was my garden in Colorado, and like I say, I had incredible luck. The things you can grow, you know, it's amazing. I've been saving these sunflower seeds for quite a few years, and this one was 11.5 feet high, and that was a good foot across on that.
Is that a mammoth?
The way?
What variety is that?
I don't know. I forgot.
A big one.
A big one, yeah. Okay, last thing. Native plant sale. Remember the Native Plant Society? We're having a sale of plants June 7th. And we have quite a variety, and there are a lot of people there who have a lot of information and knowledge about planting and growing native plants. And let me tell you, it's a lot of fun too. So, thank you all. Any questions or? Oh, that's Cleome.
I just wanted to take a picture of that notice.
Okay. Okay.
I was just looking for a little more information on how to store native seeds.
Do what?
How to store native seeds. Native seeds. How to store them. I picked up some today that I'm assuming will be home stratified, but I thinking I need to put those out maybe in the fall.
It is
So,
satisfying.
you know, like direct. So how would I store them from now until then?
Oh, until you want to plant them next year?
I was gonna like direct sow in the fall for like, you know, be outside over the summer, over the winter.
Right.
In the cold. So how would I store them now?
Oh, yeah. Just dry, out of the sun.
And you said you wrote like negative, down to 32 degrees for storage?
No, I wouldn't. I just leave it at air temperature. The question was about storing native seeds until you plant. And the best, if you're going to plant in the fall, just store them in a container that's permeable. Oxygen can get through. And at air temperature, yeah, out of the sun, yeah.
Do you think it's early enough now that you could just freeze it in our freezer for 4 to 6 weeks? Because it's pretty early to be able to direct sow still here. Or, I mean, could you just put them in the ground now and they would be cold scare?
Yeah. Yeah, if you know that ground's not going to get disturbed and so on, you could throw them on the ground now. Yeah.
Hey everybody, this is just a land acknowledgement, and Five Valley Seed Library acknowledges that these are the Aboriginal territories of the Salish and Kalispel people. We honor the path they have always shown us and carried for this place for the generations to come. We celebrate indigenous culture by encouraging gardeners to plant native seeds and use organic methods of growing. Then, for MCAT, this presentation is being recorded by Missoula Community Access Television as part of a media assistant grant donated to Five Valley Seed Library by MCAT. Thank you.
There we go. Yay.
And here is Kate.
Right. So hello everyone. Can you hear me well? All right. I love seeing faces of people that I met today and other friends. And this is intended to be a half-hour presentation within half an hour for questions. I have handouts that I want you to get at the end, so you're listening while I'm presenting, but you can take handouts home. And yeah, so I'm going to stand where I can see. Well, I don't know. I would actually rather be in my yard talking with you, but it's not great weather for that, so here we are with a presentation. Yeah, so I'm talking to you today about getting started with native plants and wildlife gardening. And for me, it's really about creating more and more resilient urban ecosystems across our city and across our land, so that we have food and medicine and oasis for ourselves and our families and our friends, and so that we have wildlife, because we need our native wildlife to pollinate all of the food that we eat, and we need that native wildlife, who all need native plants, to raise caterpillars, to raise all the generations of the next baby birds. So that's what I'm about today. And if anyone has trouble hearing me because I forgot and I have this microphone too far from my mouth, just hold up your hand and wave. Okay, so yeah, what I do is I design urban yards as ecosystems. I use Montana native plants. I emphasize perennials because that holds the soil and it sequesters carbon. They save water, which is really important. They create beauty and oasis. It lets us grow more and healthier food, and it attracts wildlife. It's basically permaculture in a nutshell, and I'm a permaculture designer, but basically this whole presentation is going to be integrated permaculture. So for me, these kinds of urban yards foster hope, especially in these times, because we get to reduce our petroleum diet, We get to reverse ecosystem collapse by creating ecosystems that bring in and make space for those native wild creatures that we need and that our planet needs. We create resilience for climate challenges with heat and water challenges. We get to share with neighbors and friends. We build human community as we do that, and I think community is our greatest security. And we have the fun and skill sharing possibilities with our children so that they are learning and have something to take on to their futures. Montana native plants are at the heart of this. That means plants that are indigenous to this bioregion who are critical partners to the native insects that have co-evolved with them for eons. And they're adapted to thrive here in our harsh winters and our harsh summers. They're not domesticated cultivars, or some people call them near natives, and I think that's a disservice. When a plant like a Canada red chokecherry has been bred to have different colors leaves and maybe no thorns or whatever with the cultivar, the native creatures, the insects that co-evolve with chokecherries aren't going to recognize that Canada red chokecherry as a chokecherry. They can't use it. It tastes different, it looks different, it smells different. So when you go to buy a plant from a nursery, I always ask for, I don't want a cultivar, I want a true native, and I'll give you some resources at the end. But if it has a fancy name, you know it's a cultivar, like Canada red chokecherry. And exotics from a different country, state, or bioregion are not native either. Of course, if you love daffodils, plant some daffodils. But I am teaching that for our ecosystems and for our food and our creatures, we need our wild native plants intermixed with those daffodils, with our fruit trees, etc. So why natives? I've already said some of this, but the ways that they help us reverse ecosystem collapse are they bring in incredible resources for native bees, for pollination. Our native butterflies and moths rely on what are called larval food plants, the plants that they've co-evolved with for millennia to raise their caterpillars, which is what all the birds use to feed baby birds in the spring. And we create wildlife corridors by having patches here and there, in this case across Missoula and across Missoula County. Natives create resilience for changing climates because they're winter hardy, because they're water conserving and drought tolerant. The word for that is xeric. You'll see that used sometimes. They provide resilient habitat and food, and they fend off pests with birds and beneficial insects. Louder. Okay. Hello, hello. Oh, even, okay, better? Thank you. Okay. And perennials sequester carbon and protect the soil. You keep after me. Okay, so today, this is just highlights. I do 4-hour workshops, hands-on in my yard that I call the living classroom. I can't touch upon everything in a half-hour presentation, but we'll have time for questions at the end and the handouts that you get to take a lot of information home with you. And we're going to talk about getting started, what some potential goals might be, a few favorite plants, including most of the seeds that I have to share with you, and resources and next steps. So that's what we're doing in this half hour. So getting started, you're going to see a series of pictures illustrating these slides that show what I started with 5 or 6 years ago and how it has evolved. My advice is start small, interplant your perennial native plants that you're interested in with your familiar food and medicine plants and herbs. Make native trees and shrubs a priority as you plan, because they're the big biomass and they make the most difference. And they take the longest to grow, so get them planted sooner than later. and use mulch to build soil, discourage weeds, and conserve water. I absolutely, I'm pretty strong about don't use pesticides and herbicides. They kill the wildlife in the soil, and if the soil isn't healthy, the plants that you're trying to grow in it will not be healthy. If you have a healthy ecosystem, you're going to have plants that are going to do really well without herbicides and pesticides. You already know some challenges that you have probably, but observe, what are the challenges? Weeds, deer, how will I work with that? And again, start small, a step at a time. You can observe your sun and shade patterns, because some plants need a lot of sun, some plants need some shade and will cook in our hot summer suns. And again, for me, reduce your lawn area as much as you can. Start small. Take a little patch of lawn and turn it into something else. Because lawns are a desert. They don't grow anything for anybody. And they use a lot of potable water that's getting more and more precious. And I'll talk a little bit more about how you can sheet mulch with cardboard and layers to convert lawn or turf to living soil that you can plant plants in. So start with imagining what's possible. Build your soil, even in those small patches, and then plant something. Here are some potential long-term goals that you can work towards. Creating a whole ecosystem of diverse, harmonious parts. Growing as much perennial food and medicine as you can. Tree islands, I call them, of multi-purpose plants and a xeric focus. So if I have a plum tree, I also have maybe a currant bush next to it. And I've got my asparagus close by, and I've got flowering plants and native grasses that are bringing in different pollinators and native insects to help it all work together. And in that way, I'm nurturing those native bees and caterpillars for our food, pollination, and for baby birds. And it gives a wonderful way to inspire and teach others and have things to share, seeds and plants. And then down the road, you've observed what your issues might be in your place with deer, with cats that are going to be attracted to come in to kill birds that you've attracted to your yard, and with rabbits. So there are ways, and a step at a time, a solution at a time. Is my volume still good? Okay. So yeah, imagine what's possible and then create it step by step. This sketch on the left-hand side is, I took time to think about, okay, I want fruit trees, where might I space them, where is there sun for them, how can I cluster shrubs around them, where shall I put my vegetable raised beds, where should my raspberries go? But you get to imagine with what you're working with, what you want and how you might lay it out, and then create it. And everyone will make mistakes. I have made plenty, and it's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. It's important to start and to learn. That's how we learn. So here are 6 or 7 native plants that are a few favorites, and I have seed of many of these. Missouri goldenrod is wonderful. I've got the Latin name listed here. It's a full sun, low water plant that grows that tall. I'm not going to read everything. It's a perennial. It's weakly rhizomatous, so it'll form a colony, but it's not real aggressive like lilac is. It's an easy plant to share seed and offspring with friends. It's a superstar larval food plant. It's one of the best flowering plants that we can grow to host many native moths and butterflies, caterpillars to feed those baby birds. There's 65 species that use goldenrods as a larval food plant. And it blooms late, so it's a wonderful, important late nectar source for pollinators. And it's deer tolerant. And I know that because I've got it in my right-of-way where there are deer. Smooth blue aster. I've got some seed, and DNRC has a table at that end of the room, and they had a bunch of seed in packets also. Do you still have seed left?
We ran out.
They ran out.
We have blue aster left on our sale still.
Nice. Okay. Alrighty. So smooth blue aster is another wonderful late blooming, even after the first frost, nectar source. It also likes full sun, but it can take part shade, low to high water. If you give it a lot of water, it'll get 36 inches tall. If you don't give it much water, it'll stay lower, like 8 inches. It's a perennial and it reseeds easily, so it's easy to share seed with friends. It's also a superstar nectar plant that will bring in an amazing variety of native bees and other pollinators, and it's also deer tolerant. And then there's Rocky Mountain bee plant. Of these plants that I'm talking about, it's the only annual. It is a native. You may have seen it driving around Missoula, and it's got these amazing flowers. It reseeds easily. It's an important pollinator plant, a nectar plant again. It likes full sun. It doesn't need water. If you put a lot of water on it, it'll get 48 inches tall. If you don't, it'll stay low. It's easy to pull up the seedlings the next year if they're starting in places where you don't want them. And it's easy to share fall seed and the young spring seedlings with friends. And again, it's a superstar nectar plant for our native pollinators, and honeybees like it as well. And it's got a long bloom season, and it's deer tolerant. And then there's curly cup gumweed. I've got a couple packets of seed today. The seed library has more seed somewhere, but not here in packets today. It's a full sun, again, low water plant, 12 to 36 inches tall. If you give it more water, it'll get 36 inches tall. It's a biennial, which means the first year are rosettes. It won't bloom the first year. And then the second year, it'll send up the flowers, and these are all the flowers. The photo on each slide illustrates the plant. It likes disturbed and compacted soil, so it's great along trails, it's great along the street. And it does reseed easily, so it's probably not something you want in a fancy garden bed where it might put down lots of seedlings, although if you're happy with pulling them up, that's fine. It is a definite superstar nectar plant as well. Again, an amazing variety of tiny native plants and other pollinators. And it's also wonderful, like the smooth blue aster, that it blooms late. So it's an important late nectar source. This is critical for our native bees that are gathering resources to overwinter, for the bumblebees, for the leafcutter bees, and et cetera, et cetera. And it's also deer tolerant. And then there's showy aster. It likes both full sun, anything from full sun to full shade, low to medium water, different height depending on what kind of sun and what kind of water it's getting, also a perennial. It does spread via rhizomes to form loose colonies. It's out in our forests in many places as an understory. And so it can act as a ground cover in shady gardens. And if you've got it in a full sun, hot place, it will want some extra water. And I don't know about its deer tolerance because mine are inside my yard and my deer fence. And then I think this is my last plant, white prairie aster. I love white prairie aster. It's a full sun plant, low water, and it'll get 3 to 12 inches tall, also a perennial. It spreads as a creeping mat of blue-green leaves. It's easy to share seed with friends. It's a superstar nectar plant. It's amazing how many tiny different species of bees and pollinators come to it when it's blooming in the late summer and fall. Also some skipper butterflies and little butterflies. And it also, like some of the others, blooms late. So it's an important late nectar source, and it is deer tolerant. Okay, let's see what's next. Oh, one more, sneezeweed. I've got some sneezeweed seed too. This is one that you don't hear about, and it's got a really unfortunate common name. Somebody probably thought it looked like ragweed, I don't know. You'll see it growing along the river. It likes full sun or part shade. It needs medium to high water, depending, especially if you put it in the full sun. It's also a perennial. It's a moist habitat flower that really likes some amount of water. I've got mine planted next to my shrub willow that I give a little bit of extra water to. And it blooms pretty late in the summer, and I think it's an incredibly beautiful plant. It's also a superstar nectar plant that will bring in lots of native bees and skipper butterflies. And I don't know about its deer tolerance out in the yard, because outside of the fence, because I have it inside the yard. Oh, I did put one more in. I love these plants. I've got 105 species of native plants in my yard that I call the living classroom. And so this is only the tip of the iceberg. Pearly Everlasting is wonderful, also a perennial, full sun or part shade, low to medium water. It has strong rhizomes and it'll spread slowly to form a big clump. I like it as an underground fence plant because it has those strong rhizomes to keep quackgrass and crabgrass and nasty, I call them nasty, rhizomatous plants that aren't native and that I don't want. It'll help make a fence underground. It's easy to share the offspring with friends or to move a baby to another part of your yard or place. And it is definitely deer tolerant. Okay, so how do you start native plants from seed? If you take home some of these packets, what do? I used to scatter them, and I've had bad luck with that. It's because when they germinate, they're still little teeny tiny baby plants, and if they germinate and then we get a week of 90-degree weather in May, they die. And they also need not to have the competition from the dandelions or the quackgrass or whatever it is that might be a weed in your yard. So my best bet now is to plant them where I can track the seedlings. This is a raised bed of mine. I plant them in the fall, so I've got easy cold stratification, which some native plants need. All of these I did have in my freezer for a while, so in theory, they're cold stratified as well. And if you take them, I'd get them planted sooner than later. You need to plant them just like vegetable seeds at a depth that's appropriate for the size of the seed. If they're tiny seeds, you hardly bury them. If they're bigger seeds, you put them down deeper. I plant them in rows, so it's obvious what is one of my Missouri goldenrods, because I've got a whole row right where I wrote down, this is a Missouri goldenrod. I've got a whole row of seedlings, and then I know, aha, those are Missouri goldenrod. They're not some stray weed that blew in that's growing over there. And then you mark or map them. I mulch them lightly so some of our winter moisture gets retained, but I don't mulch them so heavily that those little seedlings can't poke up through. And then I transplant the seedlings after they're strong later on in the spring to the place that I want, a Missouri goldenrod or a white prairie aster. Okay, I've got the next slide is going to be a lot of resources. Pipilo natives is one of my favorites, and there's so many, but Elliot started this business from scratch because he loved growing native plants. He's up in Charlotte now, but he works at the Fire Lab, and so he has a couple drop-off points in Missoula where you can order plants from him and go pick them up. His plants are wonderful. And they're all natives. There's no cultivar stuff with Elliot. He's got an amazing array. And anyhow, the reason I wanted to show this is that his website is an incredible resource. It's one of the places that I've learned what I've learned about the white prairie aster or the showy aster and what it likes and what I could plant it with. So this is the kind of page that you'll find on his website about every single plant that he sells, that talks about a little bit about the plant, has some pictures, and talks about what its height is and its water and so forth. And I'm not working for Elliot, I just have done a lot of business with him over the years, and he's an incredible resource. Wrong button. Okay. So this is a whole list of resources. I do have a newsletter that I will put out periodically, and I've got a sign-up sheet here. We didn't have a chance to print these as part of my handout packet, but if you email me either by way of my business card that I have up here, or if you sign up on the newsletter, probably it would be great to take one of my business cards and give me a call, or email me and say, Kate, can you please email me your list of resources? And I will do that. These are a few favorite nurseries and or websites, and then a few favorite books. In the middle, I've got a few business cards for Shane Sater, who's an incredible naturalist and is my son, so I know him well, but he's got a beautiful monthly podcast and blog, and he's an incredible naturalist. So if you like to listen to podcasts, give him a try. I like Karis Nursery, I like Marchie's Nursery. Cindy Atkinson out at Karis specializes in their native plants, and so she's the one I ask for if I'm going out to look for something. Marchie's is great. They have a section that's just native plants, and they know what they're talking about. If you say, I want a native plant, I don't want a cultivar.
Didn't they just close?
Uh-oh. I saw that their website is defunct. Have they closed down?
I saw in the paper.
Okay, shucks. Okay, good to know. I've been gone for a while, so thank you for that update. Okay. There you go. And I called my home and my yard, where those 105 native plants are, interplanted with fruit trees and asparagus and grapevines, the living classroom, because I'm really ardent about teaching people about this, because I want more patches of habitat across Missoula, and I want us to have a living city, not simply a place that is pavement and traffic and lawns that aren't feeding anybody. So yeah, it's basically a rich interplanted oasis of habitat and native ecosystem that combines human food, wildlife food, and beauty with all of the natives, but also fruiting shrubs and trees. And I've got a synopsis of that on this handout that you can see. And for me, it's about inspiring and sharing with each other, so that we get to learn, oh, look at what is happening here. Ooh, that's a great idea that I'd like to try in my place, and that's what I want to be doing. Yeah, so the newsletter, if you decide you want to, make sure that you put your email address so I can read it. And I do hands-on 4-hour workshops that I've already mentioned in the living classroom, but I also do a yard tour in the spring and the fall. Let's just come by and we'll walk around and you get to see what I'm doing, and we'll talk about some of my favorite plants and what I'm doing with them, and you can ask questions. I also have, I call them Learn by Helping, yard parties once a week during the growing season on an evening from 5 to 7, often Thursday nights, but not always. And again, if you sign up so that I can let you know by email, then I can tell you when they're happening and when they're starting and when the spring yard tour is. And I'm starting to do some consulting, slowly but surely, a little bit at a time. So that's that.
And your consulting is $100 an hour?
Heidi's a friend. I will, some people have a lot of money and not much time, and I'll come and give you a full design and charge you $100 an hour. But I also like coming maybe for 2 hours and talking with you about what your goals are, and then giving you homework. And so here's what you can look at, here's what you can do, so that you spend $200, but then you're helping yourself and tapping into what I know that's tailored to what you're interested in. And then I've got the evenings that you can come learn for free by helping me and sitting around the picnic table afterwards, and I'll do a mini workshop if people are interested. So I don't have a ton of money, and I've been in that kind of place many times in my life, so I like to offer a range of possibilities for people that can tailor to the time that you have, the interest that you have, and the cash that you have. And that's my official presentation. Oh, this hand has gone to sleep gripping the microphone. So we've got until 1:45 if you have questions. And so maybe just let's have people raise hands and do questions, and then I'll stay afterwards and talk too.
Conversations about deer.
Conversations about deer. One of my, So I live in Franklin of the Fort. We have tons of deer. There are deer in the Rattlesnake. There are deer up in the South Hills. There are deer in many neighborhoods of Missoula. I have a 7-foot tall fence planted around my yard that I have a special permit from the city to be able to do while what I call a living deer hedge grows up. Let me go back to this picture. The things that look like shrubs that are growing all around the yard are plants that are native, like chokecherries and serviceberries and woods rose, that I have densely planted. Some of them are thorny, and they will form thickets, and they're on their way to getting 6 feet tall, 7 feet tall, and 6 feet deep. And when deer can't see what they're going to hop into, they won't. So my concept is a living deer hedge over time that will, by its density and by its blocking visibility into the yard, will discourage deer in that way. In the meantime, I've got a 7-foot tall fence. And I had to have that for the apple trees and the fruit trees and and some of the native plants that deer will chomp on when you're getting them started. A baby serviceberry that is this tall can't stand a hungry deer munching its top 2/3. The plants that I highlighted and said were deer tolerant, I know are deer tolerant because I've got them outside the fence where there are deer. And so for me, I will also cage things, like put a cage around the black hawthorn that's out in my right-of-way that has grown this tall now, and at some point I'll take the chicken wire cage away, and it'll be strong enough and big enough that if a deer nibbles on it as it browses past, then fine. But does that help? Does that answer some of your questions, some of your thoughts? Yeah.
Is that the 7-foot, the special permit for your, like a garden fence? Is that the permit?
Yeah, so in Missoula proper, the ordinances now say that you can only have a 4-foot high fence along the street. You're allowed to have a 7-foot high wildlife fence on your alley, but that does no good if, like me, you've got an entire garden for deer and they can hop over the 4-foot fence. So I went to City Development Services, which is downtown here, in the same building that houses the mayor's office and the courts, and applied for a temporary fence permit that I forget now if I had to pay for that. I did have to pay for my fences that are on their right-of-way. But go talk to City Development Services. And they gave me a permit to have that 7-foot tall fence until my living deer hedge is tall enough and thick enough. So what I did is I didn't build a 7-foot tall fence that's 7 foot total, except along the alley. I've got a 4-foot high stock wire fence that's the legal fence with posts that are 7 feet tall that telescope, and then I've got the old chain link fence, the old 3-foot fence hung on top to make a 7-foot fence, so that in the future I can take down that upper 3 feet and be legal with the 4 feet. That is what the city wants me to have along Kemp Street. Did that answer your question? Okay. It's called a temporary fence permit, as I recall, and it's been probably 5 years since I got it, but they should be able to help you and know what you're talking about.
Otherwise, you're just putting deer-resistant plants in your front yard, and then in your backyard that has a fence around it, that's where you do your...
Right. You can fence part of your yard against deer and have your plants that you need to protect from, that's better, that you need to protect from deer fenced, and have your plants that they're not going to munch in the part that's not fenced.
And sorry, when you fence just one plant, that's 7 feet high?
I think chicken wire is usually 6 feet high, and it doesn't need to be 7 feet high because they're not going to jump
right
into a 3-foot diameter little cage around a whoever. But they just need to be tall enough that they can't, as they go past, and they'll reach up and crane their necks. So probably even a 4-foot fence would work really well with many plants as they're getting started. Sort of common sense, and what do you have materials for, and yeah. Other questions?
Do you double up? It doesn't have to be as high a fence, but if you like have a double fence of lower heights, that the deer, and you have a spacing between the two fences, that's also a way to have.
So the question is, how about the notion of 2 fences in parallel with some plants in between, so that you're making a wide space that deer can't leap over? Do you have experience with that?
I don't. No, I don't. I just have heard that was an option.
Right.
I haven't actually even seen it firsthand.
Yes. Yeah. I saw somebody who had a creative idea. It just takes twice as much fence, but the inner fence maybe doesn't have to be as tall. And I saw a creative idea where someone did what they called a chicken moat. So they had their outer fence and they had their inner fence, and they let their chickens run in that intermediate spot. Would you like to add anything?
You can also collect materials, depending how big a space that you inhabit. There's all the big windstorm last summer. I'm still picking up pieces and making brush piles out of wood, out of the trees.
Yeah. So
there's lots of options for just incorporating whatever materials.
You can get creative, and with this gentleman saying, with our big windstorm last July, there's still branches down, and you can make brush piles that are part of a barrier. So yeah, I'm only sharing what I've done that has worked well for me, but there are many, many options, as many as your creativity and what you have available to you can come up with. Other questions? Let me hand out these handouts, and then you can take a look at them, and that may generate more questions. And let's do that next. If you'll And the extras can just come back up front. I'll start a few back here. And one for you.
Is it true that deer don't like yellow plants?
I don't know. Grace asked if maybe deer don't like yellow plants. I haven't heard that, and I don't think that's true. I think it's going to depend on how they taste. Yeah. So my business card is on the front. On the back of it is my name. My legal name's Carol. I go by Kate. My phone number and my email address. Then that half sheet is a summary of what I'm doing here. The next sheet is a copy of this yard map. And the last sheet is about 30 of my very favorite native plants with a summary of how tall they get and how much water they need. Did somebody have a hand up? Yes.
I'm just wondering about, are there plants that are absolute no-nos because they discourage native bugs and insects, peonies or domestic roses or dahlias or whatever?
Yeah. The question is, are there some traditional plants that are no-nos in terms of native insects because they're discouraging to them? No, not that I know of. The thing that I like to think about and talk about is biomass. And it's the reason I said, if you love daffodils, for heaven's sakes, plant daffodils. But when you're planting bigger things that are bigger biomass, those are important. So if you have to have a lilac, but they're very aggressive and they're pushy. I don't personally like lilacs, and I've got some fighting to keep coming into my yard. You might love lilacs, and it's fine. But for me, it's thinking about the space that I have and how can I have as much volume and mass and geography that is supporting native plants with the soil and the water and the sun that I have. And if I've got 3 Norway maples, and you may have Norway maples in your yard, then they're taking up a lot of space, a lot of sun, a lot of water, and they're not helping native insects very much. So don't plant a Norway maple at any rate. Plant a cottonwood if you have room, or an aspen, or a black hawthorn, or a green ash. Our green ashes are native, although there is an emerald ash borer on its way, so I wouldn't plant a green ash tree either. But anyhow, did that answer your question? I can get going. Okay. Other questions? Grace.
You tend to plant more perennials than annuals?
Yeah, perennials are great because they're there and they hold the soil. They have deeper root systems. Not everybody is convinced that climate change is a reality, but I am, and I'm a scientist. One of the ways that we can help what's going on in our climate is pull carbon down out of the atmosphere. And the term is sequestering carbon, and perennial plants that have roots that stay in the soil sequester carbon. That's literally carbon that has gotten pulled down out of the air through photosynthesis, and now it's in the ground where it's stable again. But also, if we have perennials, we're not disturbing the soil all the time. We're not losing soil, we're not losing moisture. And in Missoula, to not be losing moisture is very important, in addition to having everything in the soil healthy and alive. Did that answer your question, Grace?
Yeah, I was leaning towards perennials.
Yeah, I have 99% perennials and 1% annuals, and that's a grab, but yeah.
Okay, but bee pollen.
The Rocky Mountain bee plant
Bee plant, that's a
self seeds, and it's an annual, and it's native, and it's great for pollinators.
That's your 1%.
That's my 1%.
And dill.
And I've got cilantro that reseeds, and but yeah, I'm big on perennials for all those reasons. Plus, for me, they're easier. I don't have to plant them every year, and I don't have to, they don't take as much water and so forth and so on. Yeah. You had a question, sir.
Yeah, I have a comment first. You just mentioned about the maples. I was walking behind the Milwaukee Road Station, and the maples along the ditch there, they've got them tapped.
Nice.
Yeah, there's
yes.
blue bags, and
yes.
They're about 4 or 5 feet up. And
nice.
There's a whole, there must be like 15 or 20 of them
yep.
that are tapped for
yep.
syrup.
So yeah, you can tap maple trees for syrup. So if you have a maple tree, for heaven's sakes, get some syrup out of it. Yeah, yeah.
Maples, and the guy that does it here in town has a very specific permit for doing what he does through the city. Sorry.
I don't know. Okay.
It is important, and I'm trying to think of what, and so I'll have to text him. But it's incredible. Like you need like 5 gallons from a tree to get like the smallest little bottle.
Yeah, it takes a lot of energy to boil sap down to syrup.
Yeah.
Box elders are native to Missoula, and they are a maple tree. They are a maple species. So you can, and I think I've met him and talked to him a couple years ago, you can tap box elder trees as well. But yeah, it takes a heck of a lot of energy to boil 5 gallons or more down into a jar of syrup.
It's like honey.
Yeah.
Ratios.
Yeah. So that was a comment that you had. Did you have a question? And we've got a question up here.
How did you arrive at the place that you're at now as far as your interest in what you're doing and even on the property that you were caring for?
So how did I get to where I am now? Okay. The question is, how did I get to where I am now? I'll try to make it brief. I'm 71. I've got an amazing life experience. I've homesteaded in the mountains of Virginia, and I'm an engineer by training, so I've been passionate about solving the problem, which is what engineers do, but solving the problems of what are we handing to the next generations. I'm a parent, but I care about all of the kids, the ones who aren't born yet, from the time I was an infant, well, a little more than an infant, I was out in the wild land watching the cardinals and the wood thrushes. And so I fell in love with the planet when I was tiny, as most of us will do, and maybe all of you had that opportunity when you were young as well, if we don't get discouraged along the way. So I fell in love with the planet long ago. I am an engineer, and I'm passionate about handing something on that's kinder and sweeter to our children. I want a beautiful wild earth. Along the way, I learned that for all of the food plants that we humans grow, and for all of the fancy plants that we grow, most of them are pollinated by native bees. Honeybees are fine, but they don't do much. They're like, 2% of the answer in terms of pollinators. And the wild birds that the chickadees or whoever that we might love they depend on caterpillars to feed their babies, because those are like packets of amazing fat and protein. So that's sort of a long answer to your question, and I landed in Missoula because I like to bike, and I like that there's a university here, and I was able in 2018 still to afford this little property and total. And then I did yard plot that I did. I also have a teaching credential, so I love teaching. So that's a lengthy answer to your question. And we've got a question up here. And
71 is looking good.
Yeah.
Thanks, Heidi. Let's see, there was something here that, so Doug Talamy is an incredible entomologist at the University of Delaware. The library has one of his books. Nature's Best Hope is one of them. I forget what the second one is. He's done the research and has done a lot of citizen science and articulated for lay people this connection between native plants and native bees and moths and butterflies. Yeah, I could leave this up too. Heidi's taking a picture. Other people can take pictures before you leave if that's helpful. He's got a great website now that's up here. It's Homegrown National Park. It's the third line down that has great resources on it, including some education about this stuff about insects, native insects. And so, yeah, I've put it all together, and this is what I'm doing now. And we have a question up front.
I'm curious if you could just go a little bit more into preparing with sheet mulch, like how long that would take, how thick of wood chips?
Yeah.
Best time of the year to do that?
Yeah, so it's a good question. I also have a handout that, again, we couldn't get printed in time, that is 2 pages long. It's from Gaia's Garden by Toby Hemingway. It's pages 88 and 89 of his bomb-proof sheet mulch. And again, if you reach out to me, I can email that to you. But I use big sheets of cardboard that, like from a bike shop or from a glass, like from Montana Glass, or from the appliance place down south. Big sheets of cardboard. I overlap them by at least a foot so that sunlight isn't getting through to the grass that was down below. I've done it at all times of year. The time that I showed you the picture of a couple slides back was in the fall. No, I went too far. Back. Here we go. Big sheets of cardboard. Mow the grass underneath. Let it get baked and dry. So it's as discouraged as it can be. And then right before you put your sheet mulch over it, water it. I experimented with some wool from a sheep farmer, but anything that's organic, meaning no herbicides, no pesticides, that kind of organic, and that will decay and form soil over time. Leaves are great, compost is great. I bought some compost from either Marchie's or Karis and put a layer of compost in. I had all my own garden compost, and then on top, leaves and mulch. So that's sort of it, some of a recipe, but you asked time of year. Fall is a great time because in theory we get our moisture in the winter, and it has all winter to start to disintegrate. The cardboard will disintegrate over time. Like if it's buried and it's got moisture coming into it as soon as 6 months maybe. But if you were starting now, I'd start this spring, and even if it's a small space, and get cardboard down, get mulch down, and then you've got something coming along. And the cool thing is that you don't have to wait for 6 months to start planting in it. If you want to plant a golden currant, then I know before I start where I want to plant it, and I do cut an X in the cardboard, and then I do my sheet mulch, but then I come back and I plant my golden currant right there. Is that helpful?
I actually like the feeling of being able to lay on the ground, especially in the summer. Are there any recommendations you might have? Is grass the only thing, or is there some other ground cover that could be used that's like soft?
Heidi is saying she loves laying down on the ground in the summer. And do I have any recommendations for anything besides lawn? There are native grasses, like prairie June grass might be pretty nice. Other ground covers. I don't know. I think what I would do is I'd do my sheet mulch, because I don't want to be mowing grass and I want living life underneath. But I'd do my sheet mulch and I'd figure out where I wanted that lay down spot to be. And then I'd plant all around it, and I'd put some nice soft mulch. Maybe that would be the time to go buy a bag of the bark mulch from Karis. And yeah.
Kill the grass, but then see what naturally comes up. Clover's a good one.
Yeah, clover. It's not native. It's not native, but it's nitrogenous, so it'll feed the soil. Yeah, plant yourself a patch of clover. Or what I was saying was, you just have yourself a mulched area that you lay down in that's comfy in the midst of the flowers and the bees and the grass, the native grasses.
Soft mulch.
Yeah.
Question, like looking at your page here, so I have like 2 acres of lawn.
Wow.
Yeah, and like you're saying start small, but I'm thinking I'm just gonna rent a big machine and tear everything out and just hope for the best, because it would take a decade for me to do small. How, like, is this, do you have like a 1/4 acre lot here, or like how big is this? And I mean, you're saying 5 years using that. We've tried the whole cardboard thing. It's not, I live out in the Hellgate area.
Yep.
It's not working out.
So we've got someone here who's got 2 acres out in the Hellgate area, has tried, it's a huge area. What I'm working with is basically 1/4 of an acre. I'm doing it by myself, I'm doing it by hand. The question was, how about renting something to come in and tear out all the grass? I know people who do that. I think you'd want to be thoughtful about what time of year. Like I think I'd wait until July when it's super hot, and when the heavy equipment that you're bringing in, or the whatever it is that you're using, isn't going to compact the soil underneath. And you're not, as you scrape off the grass, you're not going to lose a bunch of soil that's clinging to the roots, and you're not going to disturb what's underneath.
Like a lawn cutter last year and did like a huge 500 square foot patch, more than that, and it was horrible. It was backbreaking.
Yeah, it is hard. I've done that too. So yeah. Uh-oh.
I thought about renting goats. Yeah, I was gonna say.
Some sort of,
Thought about renting goats. We have chickens.
It may be dead.
We also have
So,
very angry neighbors. So I need to do it quick and dirty.
yeah.
So they can just be angry.
what to do about angry neighbors?
Let's see if we have any more questions that the whole group wants to listen to, and then y'all can come up front and we can continue talking. Y'all have a conversation going that sounds great. What do you think? How shall we do that? Other questions?
Okay, so on your sheet mulch area, and you've got an idea that you're going to plug in some shrubs and trees and perennials, but is there, in your mind, is there like a succession of plants, or would you put in some clover, to build up the soil, or other annual plants that would, easy receivers, or just to get something? I guess you can put in more mulch and straw and stuff to cover up the areas that don't
Right.
have
Right. Yeah. The question was about progression, and what if I started with some clover, or, or I don't usually do that. I've only used annual clovers where I was doing some vegetables and I wanted some ground cover, but not too close because of the slugs. I always just, if I know that I want native plants here, whatever that area is, then I get my cardboard, I lay it all down, I make my plan for what I'm going to plant first, and I try to make that be the shrubs and the bigger things. But I just did an area in the yard in the fall where I put in a jostaberry shrub and some aronia berries after I put down cardboard and mulch. And that's the simplest sheet mulching. I just do cardboard and heavy mulch on top, because you can't always come up with all those layers. But I put my jostaberry and my aronia berries in through the X's that I made in the cardboard. And then I planted a white prairie aster and a smooth blue aster, plants that I pulled from someplace else that I had extra babies, and planted them around. But once the cardboard disintegrates and the soil continues building, you can come right back in next year or the year after and add whatever. So if
Like comfrey?
yeah, like comfrey, which isn't native, but it's nice around fruit trees and for green manure. But if you like clover, then I'd think about an annual clover that you don't have permanent roots. Anyhow, did that answer your question?
Yeah, I just wondering like what you're envisioning for you got this area that's cardboarded, and what's your priorities for what comes
Right.
in.
Yeah.
Because I imagine it doesn't all get planted. If you planted over several seasons, I would imagine.
Yeah. Yeah. Or, yeah. Yeah, and we all have different ways that our brains work, and not everyone's going to map out the kind of details that I do. And things are going to die that you thought were going to live, and you might decide over time, like I've lost an apricot tree at least. Well, what am I going to do? And so it's a moving target, and you get to keep on working with it. Yeah, a relationship, Heidi said. And you'll have different ideas than I will. And I love networking with each other because we get to see what somebody else is doing and be inspired by it. Yeah.
I'm curious about a watering regimen for native seeds.
Yeah, I didn't talk about watering at all, did I? I've got it shown on the drawing there that I've got a hose bib on either side of the house, and each one of those feeds 2 drip irrigation loops. So I've got a drip irrigation loop. I don't know. Water is pretty expensive in Missoula. Drinking water is going to get to be more and more precious. So I'm always thinking about how can I use it most effectively. For me, drip irrigation makes the most sense. Certainly not aerial irrigation in the middle of the day where a bunch of it evaporates in our summers. Those soaker hoses can work nicely. I've got a loop. I've got 2 loops from here and 2 loops from here. One loop, I've got a little side loop that goes to my raised beds, and same here. But basically I've got a loop that heads all the way down this hedge, and another loop that has an offshoot that does the apple tree and the nut bushes here, but then heads around this way and goes all the way across the north side and down, and then it has some offshoots that go around the fruit trees. And then I've got 2 drip loops here that go out, and one of them goes along here and all the way down, and the other one goes along here, waters things along the way, and I've got a big loop that does all of this. Missoula Sprinklers is a business in Missoula. Ann, I don't forget what Ann's last name is, Baker, I think, is who I talked with about, hey, I want to do drip irrigation. Come out and talk to me and help me figure out how to lay it out, look at my water pressure and so forth. So I would recommend Ann based on my experience with her. And to me, a combination of drip irrigation and soaker hoses, and then I still do some watering by hand, like a gallon a week on a new plant, like a new service berry. Yeah.
But if I were, thank you.
Yeah.
If I were to direct sow what you have today.
Yes. Ah.
And I know
Okay, good idea, good question.
They have low water requirements, and maybe those, but in general, native plants. But at the beginning.
So the microphone did die. That's why I'm trying to talk as loudly as possible. The question is, so if I take some of these native seeds of yours home today, how do I take care of them in terms of watering? I got off on a totally different tangent. Basically, they're just like planting lettuce or any other vegetable seedling that we're used to. They're little seeds. They want to be kept moist but not soaking wet until they germinate, and once they germinate they want to have a little bit of water and not get dried out. It's not any different really than raising tomatoes or squash or anything from seed. Yeah.
We don't get enough rain in Missoula for rain barrel collection.
I love rain barrels. It depends how much roof you have, because if you've got a big roof, an inch of rain will fill up a lot of capacity, but you've got to have the storage capacity. It's hard in Missoula. Yeah. Other questions? And then I've got seeds up here, and you're welcome, and it's fun to talk with you all.